Why is it that you're just scrolling your phone, see someone traveling, buying a house, getting promoted, looking happy, and suddenly your mood sinks? Why is it that you haven't actually lost anything? Your income hasn't changed, your relationships are still intact, your life hasn't hit any real setbacks. And yet something inside you starts to wobble. Am I falling behind? Is there something wrong with me? And why is it that the more you tell yourself, don't overthink it, everyone has their own pace, the more that quiet mix of anxiety, lack, and resentment seems to grow clearer instead of fading? If any of this feels familiar, then today's conversation is not about telling you that you're too anxious, and it's not about asking you to shut down desire or pretend you don't care. What we're really talking about is a psychological mechanism almost everyone is living inside, yet very few truly understand. Comparison. How it quietly, gradually steals your sense of satisfaction, your ability to focus, and even your trust in life itself. And why real clarity and freedom don't come from doing better than others, but from stepping out of a comparison game that was never designed for you to win. You usually don't start comparing because you're unhappy. You start because, at some point, you accidentally see someone else's life progress bar. Maybe it's during your commute, when you see a colleague post about a promotion. Maybe it's a quiet weekend morning, when a friend shares photos from a beach vacation. Or maybe it's just a passing comment. He already bought his second home. Before that moment, you didn't have a clear problem with your life. But from that point on, a new reference slips quietly into your mind. Psychology calls this the activation of social comparison. When people lack a clear internal standard, the brain instinctively looks outward for something to measure against. To answer one question: am I doing okay? The problem is, that reference point is never neutral. What you're seeing is not a full life, but a curated outcome. You take your own unfiltered, ordinary, everyday reality and compare it to someone else's edited, highlighted moments. And just like that, your evaluation system shifts. You stop asking, am I growing? Am I moving forward? And you start asking, am I slower than them? Am I falling behind? This is the exact moment comparison quietly replaces your own judgment of yourself. Not because your life suddenly got worse, but because you handed the role of evaluator to someone else's timeline. Once comparison begins, the problem is no longer just emotional. Your entire judgment system starts to shift. Psychology and behavioral economics show that our sense of happiness depends far more on relative position than on absolute conditions. This means you can earn more and still feel worse. You can live more steadily and yet feel more anxious. Because what you're measuring is no longer life itself, but rank. At work, you might already have a decent income, reasonable hours, and manageable pressure. But the moment someone on your team moves up faster than you, your sense of satisfaction shrinks almost instantly. On social media, this effect is amplified. Algorithms don't show how most people actually live. They surface extremes: more success, more beauty, more acceleration. Over time, your brain starts to treat the abnormal as normal. It quietly convinces you that everyone else is advancing rapidly, while you're the one standing still. So you begin evaluating your life with a distorted ruler. This ruler doesn't care how hard you've worked. It doesn't respect your pace. It doesn't ask what you actually need. It answers only one question: are you doing better than others? And when life is measured this way, no amount of progress ever feels sufficient, because the ruler itself was never built for you. The most dangerous thing about comparison is that it doesn't hurt immediately. First, it makes you a promise. Once I reach that level, I'll finally feel at ease. You believe it, so you push harder, endure more, and treat present dissatisfaction as the price of a better future. But here's the problem. When you finally get close, you don't feel relief, because the goalpost has already moved. Psychology calls this hedonic adaptation. The brain quickly adjusts to new income, status, and conditions and redefines them as the new baseline. You get a better job and feel satisfied for a moment. Soon, you notice people with higher titles and faster trajectories. You earn more yet feel no calmer because your reference group has upgraded too. Comparison works like an elevator that never stops going up. You think you're climbing, but in reality, the threshold keeps rising beneath your feet. So you start telling yourself, it's not that I'm lazy. I'm just not good enough yet. But the truth is, this ladder has no top. It isn't a path toward fulfillment. It's a system designed to keep dissatisfaction alive. You haven't stopped improving. You've simply lost the ability to feel your own progress. Because comparison doesn't just measure growth, it replaces it. What comparison ultimately takes from you is not money or opportunity. It takes something more fundamental, your sense of inner control. First, it drains your attention. When your focus is constantly pulled toward other people's progress, achievements, and outcomes, it becomes difficult to stay anchored in your own rhythm. You start checking yourself repeatedly. Am I falling behind? Did I choose the wrong path? Psychology refers to this state as externalized attention, when your actions are guided not by internal goals, but by outside signals. Then, it erodes your confidence, because comparison never offers a stable standard. What feels good enough today is quickly reclassified as not enough tomorrow. Over time, you stop affirming yourself through growth and develop the habit of doubting the present moment. Finally, it blurs your sense of direction. When success is defined as looking better than others, your life goals begin to drift. You stop asking what kind of life fits you and start chasing what is most visible and most approved. Research shows that people who live long-term inside external comparison systems are more likely to experience emptiness, fatigue, and loss of meaning. Not because they lack effort, but because effort loses its orientation. The deepest cost of comparison is this: your life starts to look busier, fuller, and more correct, while feeling less and less like your own. Clarity doesn't arrive when you suddenly stop caring about others. It arrives when you realize something simple. You've been measuring your life with a ruler that was never yours. Comparison is exhausting, not because others are doing well, but because you've been using their position to decide where you should be. And that hides an important truth. Life has never been a single track. Some people pursue speed. Others seek depth. Some move toward visibility. Others need quiet. The real question has never been whether you're ahead of someone else. It's whether you've ever asked yourself, what kind of life do I actually want? When you reclaim the right to evaluate yourself, something shifts. Many of the things that once made you anxious quietly lose their power. They mattered only because you were standing inside the wrong coordinate system. Leaving comparison is not giving up on growth. It's refusing to define your worth by someone else's results. You can still strive. You can still improve. You can still want a better life. But this time, you know exactly why. Not to prove anything, not to catch up with anyone, but to move toward a version of yourself that aligns with your own inner rhythm. When you rebuild your life on your own coordinates, the world won't instantly become quiet. But for the first time, your mind will no longer be pulled in every direction, and that is where real freedom begins. This is Felix. May you understand yourself a little more deeply and treat the growing version of you with patience and kindness. See you next time.